Ну я даже, нет, я серьезно, я даже речи даже потерял, я не знаю, не вижу, да. Понимаете? Ну да. Только пусть вообще. Да. Секретно дороги. Да, понимаю, у тебя просто стирка как-то. Ну, это же просто, да. Если что такое, вообще она понимает. Что ты все как бы все под насосом был. Ну это уже как бы бугарно как-то, да. Я это что жирок, да. Ну да, точно. Да, понимаю. Ну да, не знаю, как-то не так. Да. То есть, ну, не знаю, я смотрю сам, не знаю, так вот, кстати, не знаю. Так. Да, всего. Так. Наоборот. Да. Нет. Ну, себе он так думает просто, да. Ну, чтобы злая просто, да. Нет. Половина девятого. гУБАEV-то есть он самый? Что я сейчас сделал, что ли? Ну, там только играет. Подборка.
Let's start early. The digital writing assistant more than 20 million people use to connect their ideas to the world.
This is Samsung's just announced Z Fold 3, and I spent some time with it. I'm going to show you how it's easily the greatest foldable phone ever made, with features that will make you want to take your current phone and burn it, but then also how it doesn't really make sense. So the very first thing you notice when you start using the Fold 3 is, good lord, this is a solid piece of equipment. You might remember the first Galaxy Fold. It was kind of revolutionary, but also exactly structurally sound. Samsung Z Fold 2 last year, but I think this is the phone with which they finally delivered on their original premise. It might look familiar, but this phone is, 1, smaller from almost every dimension, and a whole 11 grams lighter. It has support for 2 SIM cards instead of 1, alloy called armor aluminium, which they're saying is the strongest material to ever go on a phone. Every hinge movement has been reinforced for snap and rigidity, and I'm impressed how much it folded. It's the only foldable proper water resistance, which is especially impressive given that here you've got to worry about not just 2 separate halves, but a hinge, which is purpose-built to have a gap in it. The front and back is the toughest glass yet, and the inside panel has a new structure paired with a protective film that will apparently yet to have a gap in it. The front and back are now both covered in Gorilla Glass Victus, the toughest glass yet, and the inside panel has a new structure paired.
Как оно называется по-правильно?
But a hinge, which is purpose-built to have a gap in it. The front and back are now both covered in Gorilla Glass Victus. The toughest glass yet, and the inside panel has a new structure paired with a protective film that will apparently bring an 80% durability improvement. Fair play! I mean, that 80% number obviously is a best case scenario, but even then it's pretty clear that this design concept, this whole small screen on the front and main screen on the inside format, has been somewhat mastered. I do think they've lost a bit of character when compared to the S21 Ultra. Like, this design is such a statement. This one looks kind of generic, but do you know what? It's a folding phone, it's got enough character. We'll let it pass. And thanks to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. Plus, this is arguably the most advanced display setup you can get on a smartphone. 2 panels, a 6.2-inch cover screen and a 7.6-inch Infinity Flex screen, both sporting dynamic AMOLED 2X panels with a 120Hz refresh rate. And compared to last year, this inside display now has its selfie camera hidden under the screen. Yep, and it's now 29% brighter. Given that brightness was pretty much the only sore point with the Fold 2 screen, there's not much to complain about here. This hidden camera's not exactly invisible, it's actually really obvious when you're looking for it, but it blends just enough into what you're looking at that, providing it's in your peripheral vision, you can trick yourself into thinking this is just one uninterrupted screen. It's a really good panel, and I think it takes using it in person to fully clock the novelty of being able to have that in a form factor that can actually fit in your pocket. Powerful, 12 gigs of RAM by default, 256 gigs of fast storage on the base model, and a Snapdragon 888 chip. But probably the most impressive aspect of this, more so than design or screen or power, is the software. There are so many subtle improvements since the first Fold that the entire narrative has changed. This is no longer about just having a bigger screen to, well, make everything bigger. It's about being able to do more. Samsung's clearly gone to great lengths, both internally and with other companies like Google, Microsoft, Spotify, to make sure that when you're using this big inside screen, that you're squeezing every last bit of utility out of that extra real estate. News apps show more info than ever before. YouTube shows more thumbnails before you have to start scrolling. You can have two instances of the same app open at once now. I love how the web browser is starting to feel like a fully fledged computer one. I love that I have space for proper tabs up top and how quickly I can open up a new tab without leaving the current one. And what I really respect about Samsung's approach here is that they know foldable phones are still new territory, but instead of locking down and controlling the experience as a result of it, they're instead inviting their users to just experiment with them. There's a group of settings called Labs, where you can set how large you want the window to be for any app, so that even ones that aren't optimized for the unusual aspect ratio will still work as intended. You can configure how apps behave when it comes to multi-window multitasking. You can even use two apps stacked on top of each other now. And this is more significant than it seems. I'll give you a weird example. Whenever I play the board game Scrabble, where you have to make words to get points, we always use two phones. One to be the timer phone for each person's turn, and one to check if the words we're actually making are words. With this, set a timer that can sit in the corner of your screen and comfortably use the panel for that word checker. There's just too much to talk about here. There's an improved taskbar. There's flex mode, which basically turns your big screen into two separate, and there's cover screen mirroring, which means any change that you make on your inside home screen will now be mapped to the cover screen just for consistency. And they've managed to do all of this stuff whilst effectively knocking off £200 or euros off the price compared to last year's. Hopefully you're starting to catch my drift here. The Samsung's third stab at the same formula means that this is easy and affordable, but you knew there was going to be a but. This phone, and Samsung's foldable lineup in general, is a bit confused. And if you are enjoying this video, then a sub to the channel would be flipping fantastic. The way that Samsung is pitching this Z Fold 3 is you can use it as a normal bar phone and simply open it if you need a larger experience. Fine, but the fact that this phone costs significantly more than the Galaxy S21 and the weight of it has a significantly worse camera system all means that when you are using this phone in its cover screen mode, you're using just a really bad phone for the money. It's the equivalent of using like a $500 mid-ranger with what can only be described as an odd aspect ratio. Okay, so let's just use it in unfolded mode. Except this thing almost definitely does not have the battery capacity to sustain that. This is a tablet-sized display, which now has a high refresh rate and 29% more brightness than last gen. But we have a smaller battery than not just the bar phones like the S21 Ultra, but also compared to last year's Z Fold 2. The point is, you can only ever use one of these screens at once, and you're making a huge compromise to have the option of being able to transition between them. And I'm not even talking about this crease, which it probably hasn't gotten worse since the last phone, but it definitely hasn't gotten better. Or the fact that because this inside screen has to effectively be the size of two of these cover screens, it's a square, and there's still so much wasted space with media consumption. Let's not forget, for the price of this one phone, you could buy a Galaxy S21 Ultra, which is in a lot of ways more capable, plus an iPad, Galaxy Buds Live, plus cheeseburgers, and still have money left over. I'm a growing lad, okay? Now, the angle that... I'm a growing lad, okay? Now, the angle that I thought Samsung were going to take, which would have actually given this phone a more clear purpose, was to make this Fold the replacement for the Galaxy Note. First came onto the scene, it was a bold departure. It was drastic. As the years have gone on and the Note series reskinned S phones with a stylus, we realised that foldable phones completely embody everything that Note users have ever wanted. These are people who want huge screens, people who would actually take advantage of advanced productivity and multitasking features, people who want to be able to jot down notes and sign documents on their phone. This is it. Build an S book. This phone actually is a book. It makes sense. But they didn't do that. What they've actually done is created two versions of the S Pen, a basic Fold edition and for a limited you'll get a Fold edition included as part of your purchase of the okay, I mean, first of all, this is a limited time offer, and after that you will have to buy it separately. Secondly, the fact that it means that you also have to use a special Samsung branded case to be able to keep it with you. Thirdly, if you want the Bluetooth features that we've got used to on past S Pens, it comes in its own separate sleeve like this, and it has its B port because it's separately. The S Pen is such a great tool, but whose idea was this? Now, I don't want to dunk on some of the genuinely impressive improvements they pulled off here, but look, this new Fold is 11 grams lighter than the last Fold. Adding in a Galaxy Note style S Pen would literally cost 3 grams of weight. The fact that it's now a separate item, and the fact that you now have to inconvenience yourself to use it, just means that after the launch period, 80% of customers aren't even going to consider it. And that's a shame. And on the subject of identity crises, this is a £1,600 device, so it's on the subject of customers aren't even going to consider it, and that's a shame. And on the subject of identity crises, this is a £1,600 device, so on the subject of identity crises, this is a £1,600 device, so it's a phone for pros, right? But is it? Is it? If you follow smartphones closely, you'll have seen that a lot of the biggest improvements recently have come in the form of cameras. Super high resolutions, large sensors, new forms of stabilization, incredible zooms, laser autofocus, all this stuff. The Z Fold 3 has none of it. Now, I'm not saying that this is a bad camera. In the time I've played with it, it produces decent results. They've adjusted the coating on the lenses such that it allows 4% more light in, and credit where due, the ability of a foldable to be able to use the rear cameras to be able to take selfies like this, very underrated. But the fact that this camera hardware is actually less capable than the base version of the Galaxy S20, which is a 1.5-year old phone that launched at half the price, doesn't exactly inspire me to recommend it. How much would it have cost them to swap what we have on the S40? They've handcrafted for it possible then to save supermarket camera, right? It's 4 megapixels, and you can tell it's the normal 10 megapixel one on the cover. Look, this is a selfie from the cover camera, this is a shot from the inside screen camera. It's not pretty, and I get that this thing enhances the inside display quality, but we shouldn't have a situation where one of the things that you have to try. It's a clear sign that leave us in a because do I want to recommend this phone? Absolutely. It's so cool. But to be a user who pockets, in both senses of the word, B, doesn't care too much about camera quality, C, is willing to also get a pen and the case to hold it, D, wants an even bigger screen than the and E, is happy at the ready if wanting to properly utilize that bigger screen. Someone would have to be all these things before I decided, okay, yeah, phone for you. Samsung market to explode. For their event, they actually said, yeah, we're expecting demand to triple this year. And at the same time, Samsung is very aware that they're already leading this market. Yes, there's Huawei, but theirs has no Google Play services. Yes, there's Xiaomi, but they've only just released their first-gen product, while Samsung is out here dropping their third. And so I think Samsung's whole plan is to just wait patiently, but they've only just released their first-gen product, while Samsung is out here dropping their third. And so I think Samsung's whole plan here is to just wait patiently for demand to blow up, while they keep making tweaks to their existing concepts and keep making exclusive partnerships with software companies to just make sure they keep themselves at the top. Foldables are so exciting and they could be so many things, and given that, Samsung's playing it really safe. With the Fold 3, they have fixed a lot of the smaller issues, but they're so far ahead that they don't need to fix any of the more fundamental compromises or contradictions that come with this core design. And they can go at their own pace with these innovations. So, I would love to see more companies getting in on this, and the progress that would come from that pressure. But for now, this is it. The new Foldable King. Okay. At this point, I probably don't need to tell you what a VPN is. If you either want to browse the internet anonymously, change the location of your device to another country to watch TV shows from that country, or avoid censorship, or even just escape data throttling from your service provider, then a VPN is the way to go. But then you're faced with the question of, which one? And from what I've seen at least, there is no other VPN that's offering close to what Surfshark is. Unlimited number of users and 24/7 support for this kind of price. If you use the code BOSS, you get an 83% discount, which when combined with 3 months for free, puts the price at just $2.49 a month. I spend more on paper clips than that. Oh yeah, and it also has the option to remove a month. With 3 months for free, puts the price at just $2.49 a month. I spend more on paper clips than that. Oh yeah, and it also has the option to remove ads and trackers while browsing. To check out some of the hottest inventions you've ever seen, click here, or to see a really interesting up-and-coming operating system, click here. My name is Ara, this is Mr. Who's the Boss. I'll catch you in the next one.
Melodic minor modes. Нет, респект, респект.
Мария, Мария, когда я смотрю на тебя, у меня внутри все начинает теплеть.
Ох, Макс.
Мария, я бы даже сказал, у меня жар, я весь горю.
Макс, если ты хочешь, давай отключим тебе подогрев сиденья.
Но разве это поможет?
Тебе помогает, и тебе поможет.
Спасибо, мне полегчало.
Совершенно новый Volkswagen Taos.
Фокс.
Hello and welcome to a new jazz lesson.
Друзья,
This
смотри,
week-
все эти проблемы решаются так. Если ты не можешь изменить, у тебя денег не хватает. Их всегда понимают. То есть, иначе вообще не стоит, этот процесс не стоит вообще ничего себе. Я тебе серьезно говорю. Да, ну просто все настолько элементарно, что ты мужик, у тебя логика работает, нет, вот и все. Ну не лезь тогда, если ты любишь ее, там, какую-нибудь ее, тем более так вот это, о чем речь идет. Не любишь и таки нахер она сдалась, а ты отомстить ей хочешь. Вот и пожалуйста, вот я тебе говорю, реально вместе. Ну, лучше ты никак не отомстишь никому, и без защиты ты не окажешься никак. Провоцирует, провокатор физик. Да я тебе вот точно говорю, больше ничего, да. И так интересно, всем жизнь ставить, вообще я тебе точно говорю. Да, понимаю. Особенно тем, кого еще писать. Ну да. Ладно. Не надо. Ой, мама, не надо. Я понимаю. Ну, жить тогда понарошку. Да, только не жди потом жизни. Я тебе просто говорю, да, вот когда ты хочешь завладеть женщиной, понимаешь? Ну ты просто мачо, забеременеть. Больше ты никак не сможешь завладеть. Это йод иметь, вот и йод имел. Больше никак не... Что, что, понимаешь? Это вообще для всех, вообще на всех. Я думаю, да. Ну да.
Video, we will look into the ascending melodic minor scale and all its family variants. That will be 7 great jazz scales in total. we will learn how to use all these scales when improvising over the 2-5-1 chord progression. Now, these fantastic scales when playing a 2-5-1 progression. We will start this lesson making a theoretic foundation. We will learn how to manage all the 7 scales using a simple circular system. Then we will learn how to use the scales in practice. So, first theory, then practice. By the way, my name is Oliver Prehn, and I surely hope you will enjoy this journey into the very nature of the ascending scales. Okay, the ascending melodic minor scale in C goes like this. It starts up as a natural minor scale with the E flat note, and it ends as a major scale, right? So, looking melodically just makes scale. And then we flatten the mid third to a minor third. Minor scale comes in 7 variants. To manage the 7 scales, we draw a circle. The circle of melodic minor scales. This circular tool we are about to make is very useful and handy. It orders and connects all the variants of the ascending melodic minor scale. So this will be gold for us when improvising jazz. Inside the melodic minor scale we have 7 notes, right? So let's make 7 markers on the circle. 1 marker for each scale note. The first note, the key note, in the scale we define to be
знаешь что, кстати, блин, хорошо, что ты сказал, я не сделал. Потому что сейчас я сейчас началось. Нет, тут просто, как бы, ты понимаешь, просто все ответственность, да, понимаешь, это. Да, Сверху она, кстати, хорошо, да. Она на наркоту похожа, кстати. Так, что такое вокруг? Нет, что там придется, что ли, здесь выбрать? Да уж, да. Нет, так это нонсенс, понимаешь? Да. Я тебе просто говорю, что на самом деле я не буду даже ничего продолжать. О чем ты говоришь? Просто ты как бы думал, я тебе говорю, экономь свою судьбу, вот и все. Ну вот, да. Да, вот так и считаю, да. Вот, такая говорит, да. Ну тогда, да, ну это что, уже, Нет, это можно сделать так. То есть ты добиваешь и теоретически обосновываешь полностью, да, то есть. А мы все равно ничего не понимаем. Это продукт любви будет, и ты будешь интересно жить потом. Я тебе точнее, у тебя жизнь будет осмысленная после этого, да. То есть как бы, да, то есть как бы. Да, точно ты точно ее не зря теперь будешь жить. И вообще кажется, да, понимаешь, да. Да, понимаешь, ну да. Ну живи тогда хорошо. Тогда хорошо. Как всегда, здоровье, нравится. Я тебе сейчас говорю, я не женщина, понимаешь? Ну значит давать не надо было. Меня это не касается, понимаешь? Да. Ну, понимаю, как-то. Ой, вот не надо. Да какая нахер разница, ты о чем говоришь? У тебя одна единственная жизнь. Мне вообще похер. Ну да, ничего не касается. Если очень надо, то можно. Все наоборот, да, просто удобство. Ну ладно. Не соел бы. Просто удобство. А у тебя жизнь-то одна единственная, тело одно единственное, всего, да. Так не делай, нельзя. Вот это не надо. Ну, наверное, да, Ну, смотри, да. То есть она все равно так. Да. Видишь, как бы оно мудрее. Ничего тут нового. Наверное. Ну, он, понимаете, ну это так просто придумали, что удобно. Вранье просто, да. Ну, смотри сам. Нет, все правильно. Я тебе говорю, в этом мире можно жить нормально. Тебя так больше смотри на регион. Мы такие, мы, да. Нет, тебя никто кричать не будет, они тебе ничем не обязаны. Ты начнешь людей спрашивать, они такие, жизнь просто живет. Да, понимаете? Даже родители так понимают. Да, понимаешь, да. То, что дело, да. Тебе то же самое психологи, психиатры, все тебе одно и то же будут говорить. Жизнь сама тебе покажет один раз, то же самое. Ну, доверяй больше. Если тебя взяли, так что надо сделать, чтобы тебя начали бросать? Ну, скажем так, да. То есть они не совсем правда и не обязаны, что самое ужасное, представляешь? Да, а то у тебя есть женская душа, а у тебя мужское ум, наверное. Ну и какая-то ну так, это не учение, ну, немножко, да. Как бы ты можешь, если тебе надо будет, ты можешь, а тебе не надо. Мне зачем? Чтобы улучшить себя, реально было хорошо, да. Да, реально, да. Ну, да, ну, да. На закладе, я просто, да. Да. Пожалели. Да, имеешь право жить как мужик. По идее даже говорить мне не о чем было. Да. Вот и познать, кто ты на самом деле есть, как бы, да. И женщины, они же ушами воспринимают тебя, правильно? Ушами, вот, да. Вот можешь прям, да, сам на себя выйдешь, короче, да. Про себя это вот. Ладно, ну это валяйте. Ну, значит, не было любви. Любви не было, и все, как в народе говорят. Нечем кукурить, как говорится. Да. Thank